Hey, my name is Tommy Schultz. I'm originally from the US. I left the US to join the US Peace Corps in 2004 and actually never came back. So I've been abroad for, I guess, 15 or so years. So now I'm based in Bali, but I travel internationally, regionally all over the world as a photographer and writer. Okay. I am 44 years old and I started shooting seriously when I was 17, so that's 27 years, it's hard to believe. Full-time as a professional photographer since 2007, so that is about 12 years as my full-time living. Let's see. I first got into surf photography as an extension of my underwater photography. I started shooting underwater when I was in the Peace Corps because I was actually working at a marine biology lab and I'm not a marine biologist, so they needed me to do something useful, and I started taking photos of the underwater projects that my Peace Corps assignment called for. So I first came to Bali in 2007 with a project sponsored by National Geographic, and I realized, you know, there's this whole new environment here of shooting waves. So I started using actually just like a point and shoot in a simple case and swimming out in the surf. And, you know, I started to get some shots that I was happy with. I started to get published a little bit with those shots, and then I eventually met Liquid Eye and Phil, and that's been about 10 years since I've been with Liquid Eye, and then I finally got an SLR, which was a big step up for me in terms of quality and professionalism, and then that was when things, you know, I started taking it a bit more seriously with the surf photos, but I really always consider myself more of an ocean photographer. I'm connected to the stories and people who are ocean people. That's always been my common thread with all of my work. Okay. I first realized, or maybe I started to realize when I could do this as a career, to give you the backstory, I actually used to run a marketing department for a nonprofit, and I worked with photographers back then. So I had an interesting perspective because I actually came to be a professional photographer from the perspective of hiring photographers, which really helped me with, I think, landing more clients because I sort of knew how it felt to hire a photographer. So it maybe gave me a little bit of an edge. So there were two photographers, Val Atkinson and Tom Montgomery, who were pretty instrumental in helping me get started. And, you know, teaching me about rates, how to negotiate rates, how to work with clients, how to not waste their time. All these things are extremely important when you start actually being serious about making a living doing this. And this is surf photography or any kind of photography. But after I left the US in 2004 to join the Peace Corps, I was having all these adventures and I just couldn't go back to working in an office. I mean, it just was not going to happen. So I realized that through the opportunities afforded by being a professional photographer, that I could just go on incredible adventures all the time and work with amazing people. And that's kind of been how it's evolved. And each year gets a little bit better, more interesting projects, different people. It's just been a steady process, a long process, but steady. So you're going to show me, okay. Yeah, I mean, it's a cliche, but yes, I think so. I mean, I absolutely love what I do. It never gets boring. I mean, I don't mean to make it sound like it's never any difficulty, because it's not easy, but it's incredible. I mean, the places I've seen, the people that I've gotten to work with, I mean, it is a dream. And I feel extremely lucky for as much as I've been able to do and the people that I've met, and very grateful to all the opportunities, to Liquid Eye and all the help that they've given me with getting all this equipment to work in remote places and under difficult deadlines and all this stuff. I would really have a hard time doing something else at this point. I can't imagine going back to a real job. Let me think. Let me think. Okay, this is kind of a hard question. I think the toughest thing about doing this is you do have to make sacrifices. I mean, you are going to have to, like for example, I don't see my immediate family all that much as I'd like to. So that is one difficult thing. I think in terms of the actual job, I mean, this is a difficult thing, but it's a challenge that I think I like. You always have to be evolving, improving, finding ways to stand out, because as anyone would know these days, photography is a very competitive field. So whatever you can do to make yourself different or unusual or memorable, this is like a constant process. So if you're not committed to really going for it like that, this is going to be a hard time for you, I think. So you know, once you've adopted that mindset of constant improvement, I mean, to me, my goal is I want to be embarrassed by what I did 2 years ago in terms of my work. That's my goal. I want to be always improving as much as I can. I don't always succeed, but that's the goal. You always have to be improving, learning, meeting new people. It's a constant process. So that's the biggest challenge of doing this as a full-time job. Okay, so the biggest lesson that I've learned as a photographer, and I think this would apply to any job, is it really comes down to your ability to connect and work with other people. Photography and any creative field is a very human process. So if you're not easy to work with, or if you've got an ego, or if you haven't difficulty with communicating with other people, I think you're going to have a real hard time doing this. So the biggest lesson that I've learned is you have to be in it for the long game, you know, and it's building relationships with genuine relationships with people, not trying to make a quick buck. I'm always surprised at how many times someone will come to me years later and they say, hey, you know, you're still around, would you help me with this? You know, and I think a lot of that comes from I try and always treat my clients with respect, always hit the deadlines, don't waste their time. These are basic things that maybe not everybody does. So if I could tell someone who is just starting out, one of the most important things that you need to learn is it can feel like a solo career because you're out shooting all by yourself, but it really is not. It's a collaborative thing. And if you're not able to work with other people, you're going to have a really hard time. Unfortunately, yes. I have had a few close calls, several, but I'll give you one because I think this one is kind of illustrative of the others. This was early in my career. I was shooting a marine protected area in the remote Sulu Sea of the Philippines, and we had been diving in the morning. You know, the tide was slack. It was between the high and low tide, so there was no current. And we went back to the boat to decompress, you know, to do our safety stop and have some, you know, let our bodies adjust from being underwater. And a manta swam by, and you know, we hadn't seen a manta yet, so me and the two other photographers, well, one was a videographer, we all jumped in. We didn't tell anyone, we didn't ask anybody, we just jumped in and the current was just ripping. Nobody could get back to the boat. So we ended up being okay, kind of, I won't go into all the details of that, but you know, the lesson that I would say is you really have to be aware of your environment. So, you know, especially with surf photography, what I tell beginning surf photographers is, for example, don't swim out in surf that you're not comfortable even surfing yourself. Like if you're not comfortable shooting or surfing like a 10-foot wave, do not swim out and try and shoot it. A lot of, at least for me, a lot of the comfort and I guess knowledge of being in the ocean came from surfing myself. So I learned sort of the hard way with my own surfboard before I swam out, because ultimately, unfortunately, most of these situations, nobody is going to help you. Like there aren't lifeguards that are going to be able to help you. So absolutely don't put yourself in a situation that you're not completely aware of before you get in the water, because once you're in the water, you're on your own. So yes, I do. I mean, I have a lot of stories, but one, I mean, I do remember this particular session. So I was shooting in Java, so basically not too far from Bali, but we were in the place called Pacitan Watukurong, which is a bay that actually, there's a right and a left-hander on each side of the bay, and then all the water drains out this channel in the middle. So my friend convinced me to shoot from a surfboard, which I usually don't do, and said I didn't need fins. So yeah, I very easily, you know, it's drifted out with the current really easy. Got some nice shots, ended up with one magazine cover from that shoot. Then I turned to go in and I realized, oh man, there's no way I'm getting in. You know, because the entire bay, both the right hand and left hand waves were draining into this channel, and it was like Niagara Falls, like a river of water coming at you. And I'm trying to paddle with the surfboard under my chest, so I wasn't really getting a real full arm extension on the paddling. So, and it was getting dark, and everyone went in. All, you know, my friends the surfers that I was shooting, they all went in. One I won't name was laughing at me on the beach, which is kind of not so nice. I don't think they realized quite how serious of a situation it was. And I got in, touched the reef like 3 times, and the current would just pull me back out into the channel. And I was just thinking, I don't know what I'm gonna do, because it was getting dark. And finally, this bodyboarder, I think from Brazil, just gave me a real, like a push, like pushed the back of the board and got me over sort of the whitewater, which I couldn't do myself because I had the camera. And I was able to get in, and I literally just kind of threw myself on the beach, like, you know, kissing the sand. So, I mean, that was another one that was like, okay, you know, like I just was talking about knowing the conditions before you swim out. That one was another one where if that guy hadn't helped me, I don't know. I mean, I probably would have needed to be, you know, like a lifeline or something thrown out. Let me see. Okay, that's a good question. I want to. I've tried a few times, but I haven't put enough effort into it, and I haven't found the right intern. So for me, I know the balance with interning with a photographer is, I want you to do all the work that I don't want to do, and then you want to learn everything from me and do all the fun stuff. So finding the balance between those is a challenge, and I haven't figured that out yet. So please, if you see this, send me you know, either a portfolio. I'm actually looking more for, I think for an intern for me, I need a technical person, like someone who's good at organizing photos or cutting video. So those are the 2 skills that I'm probably most in need of, basically like a studio manager type position. But I am, you know, I would like to pay it forward and help somebody out who's just learning, but my schedule is pretty busy, and I think this is the case for most photographers who are working full time. So if you approach somebody, you know, be not too pushy, but, you know, realize that it might take them a little while to get back to you. So I have been, ever since I was shooting professionally, I've been shooting with Canon 5D Mark II, 3, and now 4, with a series of L lenses. So those have been good. And now I'm in the process of switching to be an ambassador for Leica. So that will be the Leica SL mirrorless. So that's going to be an entirely different system. So I'm excited about that. That's my next move. But for the last, 27 years, it's been Canon the whole time. So I am using, like I said, the Canon system. So Canon lens, Canon DSLR and lenses, and I have a Liquid Eye C2100 as my housing with, I actually have 5 ports. So I'm using the big dome, which I use for splits. I have a small dome, basically for a fisheye. So I use that for shooting large, basically large marine animals like whale sharks or anything like a big reefscape. It makes the water look clear because you can get really close to something big with the fisheye. So that's a small dome. Then I use a 16 to 35 millimeter Canon lens with a Liquid Eye flat port. And then I have a 24 to 70 Canon lens with the trumpet port, flat port, trumpet port, and then I use a 70 to 200 zoom f4 in the also a flat port. So those are my 5 ports, and then I also use the video grips when I dive, both for video and photo. I find it's handier to have the video grips when you're diving. And then of course with surf, I use the new pistol grip, which is awesome. And let's see, I also have a GoPro. I use the Liquid Eye GoPro mount on top of the camera. So I'm using right now GoPro 7, which does a pretty good job. So I shoot video on the top and then still photos on the bottom. So I found, especially with a commercial shoot for clients, that I can also sell the video, which is great. So the the stabilized video on the GoPro is extremely usable, simultaneously shooting with still photos. So that is my sort of dream combination. Travels great, packs down. I can fit most of it in my carry-on. So yeah, that's my system right now. Okay, camera gear. I think, I've heard this said, I didn't make this up, but the best camera is the one you have, right? So at this point, even a phone is better than the first DSLR that was used to publish, National Geographic stories. I think a lot of people worry too much about the gear in the beginning and not focus on developing their eye and developing their storytelling ability with a camera. Obviously, the better equipment you have, it gives you more creative options. But I think for now, if someone was just starting out, I would tell them to look at the mirrorless, one of the mirrorless, like the Sony or the Canon or Nikon mirrorless systems that are out now. Or I'm using the Leica now, but that is more of it's quite a bit more expensive than someone would want to spend when they're starting out. So I would, go with a system that will give you reasonable quality, publishable quality, without breaking the bank. Because obviously when you're starting out, you still got a budget for your disk storage, for storing all your photos. You need a budget to travel. If you're ever going to create anything that's interesting, you need to go somewhere interesting. All of these things add up. So it's not just the equipment that you need to factor in. And then obviously, buying a water housing. So I think, start simple, I like the liquid eye, just the basic model that just is basically like a housing with a trigger. That is more than I had when I started out. I mean, that would have been like a dream for me when I first started out. So, the basic liquid eye housing is a great starting point, and then obviously now I'm shooting the Pro model, which gives me a lot of creative options. But you can get very publishable images with even the most basic equipment that's available now. Yes, workshops. So this is something that I'm excited to do more of going forward, with Leica specifically. So I do enjoy teaching. I think, helping someone get past a difficult point in their creative process is actually really also rewarding to me as a creative person. So I tend to not focus as much on sort of the really technical stuff. I think the hardest thing about photography, the technical stuff you can learn on YouTube or in the manual. The hardest thing is developing your own eye, your own ability to tell a story, and your own ability to connect with your audience, whoever that might be. So, guiding that process, I think, is the most important skill that you could take out of a workshop that'll enable you to grow quite a bit more than you otherwise would if you were just trying to learn on your own. Because I actually never went to a workshop when I was starting out and just learned by trial and error. So at this point, it's been a lot of errors. I mean, I was looking at my photo catalog now, and it's up to almost 600,000 images. So that's a lot of time shooting. And that process, I know that I could have learned or cut out some of the harder, more less productive points if I had worked with someone who knew more what they were doing. So I'm excited to kind of pay that forward and help you guys learn more and avoid the mistakes that I and other photographers made when they were starting out. Let's see. Yes. Okay, so this is a big question, but I'll try and simplify it with an analogy. So, and I think this applies to surf photography or any kind of photography. Photography is like cooking, very much. Everyone has a stove, everyone has a camera now, right? So everyone can sort of cook. They can cook like maybe a grilled cheese or a macaroni and cheese. Everyone can sort of take photos now because you've got your phone with you all the time. So your challenge is, how are you going to be, you don't want to be the guy making or girl making the grilled cheese, right? That's never going to get you very far. So you have to you have to try and push yourself to make that five-star meal, that master chef creation. That's where it comes from, because otherwise someone's just going to use their own cell phone, like why would they ever pay you to do something? So I think that process happens just through trial and error and from working really hard. I mean, this is the kind of thing where, for me, I think it took about 5 years where I was pretty poor. I mean, you got to kind of be ready to not have a lot of extra money for about 5 years at least to get through the difficult part. So it's not a get-rich-quick scheme, but if you can develop your eye and develop your creative voice so that you're able to stand out, think of like a chef, like a master chef, or watch the way like a restaurant brands themselves to be different than the restaurant next door. Look at New York City. There's 100 pizzerias. How does one differentiate itself? Those kind of lessons, look for lessons outside of the photography field, I think, and you'll push yourself in ways that will make you more visible to the kinds of clients that you'd like to find. All right. Okay, so my advice, and maybe I'll frame this to like my younger self, but it applies to you, especially if you're younger and you're just getting started. Say you're graduating from school and you don't know what you're gonna do. I think, you know, the biggest thing, the biggest gift you can give yourself is doing something that you're passionate about. And I know this gets thrown out a lot, you know, as a follow your passion. So I've tried to summarize it. And the way that I try to look at things now is fuck yeah or hell no. So what I mean by that is if I'm not totally excited about doing it, then you don't do it. And that's a little easier for me to say now because I've been doing this for a longer period of time, but that to me is the goal, because if you're totally committed into doing what you're doing, the quality of your work is going to be that much better. And you know, there's a saying, it's be so good that they can't ignore you. If you can get to that level, then it gets, and this applies to any field, I think. It's so competitive in the world now, I feel like, not to be negative, but the world is so competitive now that the only way to really stand out is you have to really be into it. You know, like you can't be faking it. People know when you're faking it now. So you absolutely have to commit to it and don't fuck around. You know, it's about making your mark in the limited time that we all have. Hey, good.